the man I loved married someone else. At least, that's what the whole city believed. The rain slid down my umbrella in slow silver streams as I stood across the street from St. Andrew's Cathedral. The church bells echoed through downtown Manhattan, deep and solemn, carrying across the wet pavement and into the crowd gathered behind the security barriers. Every television camera pointed toward the grand stone steps. Every reporter was smiling. Every headline would tell the same story by sunset. Adrian Moretti, New York's most powerful businessman, was finally getting married. My fingers tightened around the folded invitation hidden inside my coat pocket. The paper was damp from being handled too many times over the last 3 months. 3 months of unanswered questions. 3 months of sleepless nights. 3 months of trying to convince myself that the man who once promised me forever had chosen someone else. The wind pushed cold rain against my face, and I barely noticed. My eyes never left the cathedral entrance. Black SUVs lined the curb. Men in dark suits stood guard beneath large umbrellas. Wealthy guests stepped carefully across the red carpet. Diamonds flashed beneath camera lights. The city's elite had arrived to celebrate what they called the wedding of the decade. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew that 18 months earlier, I had been sitting on the floor of a hospital room drawing pictures with Adrian's frightened little boy while his entire world quietly fell apart. None of them knew that I had once worn a ring hidden beneath the sleeve of my sweater. Or that Adrian had looked at me one winter night and whispered words I still heard in my dreams. I closed my eyes for a moment. The memory hurt more than the cold. More than the rain. More than seeing his name printed beside another woman's. A sudden movement near the cathedral doors pulled me back to reality. The crowd erupted into cheers. Cameras lifted higher. Reporters rushed forward. My pulse hammered against my ribs as Adrian appeared at the top of the steps. Even from across the street, I recognized him instantly. Tall. Impossibly composed. Dark hair perfectly styled despite the weather. The same sharp profile I had traced with my eyes 1,000 times before. Yet something felt wrong. The city saw a man about to marry the woman standing beside him. I saw someone carrying the weight of an entire world on his shoulders. His expression never changed. He smiled when expected. Nodded when spoken to. Played his role perfectly. But I knew Adrian. And the man standing on those steps looked nothing like the one who used to sit awake until 2 in the morning worrying about his son. He looked empty. My throat tightened. I should have walked away. I should have left New York months ago. Instead, I stood frozen beneath the rain, unable to look anywhere else. Then it happened. For one brief second, Adrian turned his head. Across the crowd. Across the cameras. Across the street. His eyes found mine. Everything else disappeared. The noise. The reporters. The church bells. The city itself. Just those familiar green eyes locking onto me through the rain. And for the first time in 3 months, I saw genuine emotion break through the mask. Shock. Relief. Disbelief. My breath caught. The woman beside him said something. Adrian never looked at her. He was still staring at me. Then he took one step forward. And in that instant, I realized this wedding was never going to happen the way anyone expected. 18 months earlier, the smell of disinfectant and stale coffee clung to the air as I locked the front door of my tiny speech therapy clinic in Queens. My shoulders ached. My feet felt heavier than the winter slush covering the sidewalks outside. It was almost 9 o'clock, and all I wanted was to collapse onto my couch with a blanket and forget the world for a few hours. I had just shoved my keys into my purse when my phone started ringing. I almost ignored it. Almost. "Claire, please tell me you are still nearby," my friend Melissa said the moment I answered. Her voice sounded rushed. "Do not tell me another emergency evaluation came in." "Actually, yes." I groaned and leaned my head against the cold glass door. "Melissa. I know. I know. But this one is different." Mount Sinai called. They specifically requested someone with your background. I closed my eyes. Every muscle in my body protested. What kind of case? There was a pause. A child who has not spoken in nearly 3 years. That got my attention. 3 years? That is what they told me. I looked up at the dark sky. Snow flurries drifted beneath the streetlights. How old? 7. I sighed. Give me 20 minutes. 45 minutes later, I stepped into one of the most expensive private hospital wings I had ever seen. Marble floors gleamed beneath soft lighting. Fresh flowers sat on every table. Everything felt quiet. Controlled. Almost too perfect. A nurse escorted me down a long hallway. The family appreciates privacy, she explained carefully. The family? I asked. You will understand shortly. That answer only made me more curious. When we reached the room, I immediately noticed the men standing outside. Dark suits. Earpieces. Expressions that revealed absolutely nothing. They were not hospital security. The realization sent a small wave of unease through me. The nurse opened the door. Inside, a young boy sat on the bed beside the window. He looked tiny against the oversized room. Dark hair. Pale skin. Bright green eyes fixed on the snow falling beyond the glass. He did not react when I entered. He did not even glance in my direction. The attending physician quietly reviewed the case. Multiple specialists. No progress. Minimal communication. Complete silence. The boy remained motionless through the entire explanation. When the doctor finished, I asked the same question I always asked. Can everyone give us a little space? The room emptied within seconds. The door clicked shut behind them. For a moment, it was just me and the child. I pulled a chair closer but did not sit. Instead, I lowered myself onto the carpet. Children trusted people who met them at eye level. Years of experience had taught me that. The boy still ignored me. I reached into my bag and pulled out a sketchpad. Then I started drawing. No introductions. No questions. No pressure. Just simple lines moving across paper. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, I noticed movement from the corner of my eye. The boy was watching. Not much. Just enough. I pretended not to notice. Slowly, a box of colored pencils slid across the carpet toward him. Another 5 minutes passed. Then a small hand reached forward and selected a green pencil. My heartbeat quickened. Not because he spoke. He did not. But because for the first time, he chose to participate. And sometimes, that was where miracles began. The green pencil moved slowly across the paper. A tree appeared first. Thin branches stretched toward an empty sky. Then he added a small bird sitting alone near the top. I kept drawing beside him without saying a word. Years of working with children had taught me something important. Silence was not the absence of communication. Sometimes silence was communication. The boy glanced at my page. I had drawn another bird beside his. Not touching. Just close enough that neither one looked alone anymore. His eyes lingered on the picture for a second before returning to his own drawing. It felt like the smallest victory in the world. And somehow the most important. 20 minutes later, a soft knock sounded at the door. The boy immediately stiffened. His pencil stopped moving. The warmth that had slowly begun to appear in his expression vanished. I looked toward the door and understood. Whoever was outside mattered. A lot. The door opened. Every instinct in my body sharpened at once. A man stepped inside. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dark charcoal suit tailored perfectly. Dark hair brushed back from a strong face. His green eyes were nearly identical to the child's. The resemblance was impossible to miss. He paused when he noticed the drawings scattered across the floor. Then his gaze settled on his son. For a moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. The silence felt different now. Heavy. Fragile. Important. The boy looked down at his paper again. The man slowly exhaled. It was such a small reaction that most people would have missed it. I did not. Relief. Hope. Fear. All mixed together. Did he engage? The man asked quietly. His voice was deep and controlled. The kind of voice people listen to. I nodded. A little. His eyes shifted to the green pencil still resting in his son's hand. Something softened in his expression. Not much. Just enough to reveal the father beneath whatever else he was. The boy suddenly picked up another pencil and added a second bird beside the first one. The room became completely still. I watched the man's face change. Not dramatically. Just a slight tightening around the eyes. A flicker of emotion he clearly was not used to showing. He has not drawn another bird in 3 years, he said. I looked up. What does that mean? The man stared at the paper for several seconds. His mother used to tell him that birds never fly alone if they have someone worth coming home to. The answer landed somewhere deep inside my chest. The boy continued drawing. Unaware that he had just shattered a wall nobody else had managed to touch. I carefully gathered my things and stood. He made all the progress, I said. I just gave him space. The man stepped closer. Not intimidating. Not demanding. Just curious. Most specialists spent months trying to make him talk. Sometimes people do not need someone to make them talk, I replied. Sometimes they need someone willing to listen first. For the first time, an actual smile touched his face. Brief. Genuine. Dangerous only because it made him suddenly look human. I am Adrian Moretti, he said. The name meant nothing to me at the time. Absolutely nothing. Looking back now, that was probably the last peaceful moment of my life. Snow tapped softly against the hospital window as I stepped out into the hallway. The clock on the wall read a little after 11, but exhaustion had long since stopped caring about numbers. I should have gone home. Instead, I found myself replaying the image of the little green bird on that sheet of paper. 3 years of silence, and somehow tonight he had chosen to let someone in. The elevator doors opened with a quiet chime. I was halfway inside when a voice stopped me. Miss Bennett. I turned. Adrian Moretti stood at the far end of the corridor. Without the crowd of doctors and nurses around him, he seemed even taller. More imposing. Yet there was something unexpectedly tired in his eyes. He walked toward me with measured steps, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat. I wanted to thank you personally. I offered a small smile. You already did. Not properly. His gaze shifted briefly toward the hospital room where his son remained. You gave me something tonight that I had almost stopped hoping for. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. Most powerful people hid their emotions behind carefully constructed walls. Adrian seemed to have entire fortresses built around his. The fact that he had lowered one of them, even slightly, felt significant. He did the hard part, I said. Children are stronger than adults give them credit for. Adrian nodded slowly. You sound like someone who has learned that from experience. I laughed softly. Occupational hazard. For the first time, amusement touched his face. It transformed him completely. Not softer exactly. Just warmer. More real. We walked toward the elevator together. Neither of us seemed in a hurry to leave. How long have you worked with children? He asked. Almost 7 years. And you still care this much? The question surprised me. Why would I stop? He looked away for a second. Most people eventually do. The elevator arrived. Neither of us stepped inside. Maybe you know the wrong people, I replied. Something unreadable crossed his expression. Before he could answer, one of the men from outside his son's room approached. He leaned close and quietly said something. Adrian's posture changed immediately. Not dramatically. Just enough to remind me that there were parts of his life I knew nothing about. The warmth disappeared behind that calm, controlled mask again. I have to go, he said. Of course. I finally stepped into the elevator. The doors began to close. Then Adrian surprised me. Claire. I looked up. Will you come back tomorrow? The question hung between us. Professional. Simple. Yet something about the way he asked made my heartbeat stumble. I smiled. If your son wants me there, I will be there. The doors slid shut. As the elevator descended, I caught one final glimpse of him standing alone in the hallway. Still watching. Still thinking. I had no idea that a simple promise made in a hospital elevator would become the beginning of the most important chapter of my life. And I definitely did not know that by this time next year, half of New York would hate me simply because Adrian Moretti loved me. The next morning, the smell of fresh coffee followed me into Mount Sinai as sunlight spilled through the massive lobby windows. New York looked cleaner after a snowfall. Brighter. Less complicated. It was a lie, of course. New York was never simple. I checked in at the reception desk and rode the elevator to the pediatric floor. For some reason, I found myself nervous. It made no sense. I had worked with hundreds of children over the years. Yet as the elevator climbed higher, I kept thinking about a little green bird and a man with tired eyes. When I reached the room, I stopped in surprise. Ethan was already sitting at the small table near the window. Colored pencils were neatly arranged beside him. A blank sketchpad waited in front of him. It looked as if he had been expecting me. The realization warmed something inside my chest. Good morning, I said softly. He glanced up. Not long. Just enough to acknowledge my presence. Then he pushed a sheet of paper toward the empty chair beside him. An invitation. My smile appeared before I could stop it. I guess that means I am allowed to sit here. Ethan looked down, but I could have sworn I saw the faintest hint of amusement. We spent the next hour drawing. No pressure. No demands. Just colors and quiet moments. By the end of the session, he had drawn an entire forest filled with birds. Some alone. Some together. Progress did not always arrive in dramatic breakthroughs. Sometimes it arrived one pencil stroke at a time. Around noon, a knock sounded at the door. Adrian entered carrying a paper bag from a bakery. The rich smell of cinnamon immediately filled the room. Ethan's eyes followed him. Another small victory. Adrian noticed it too. I brought lunch, he said. His gaze shifted toward me. For both of you. I laughed. Bribery is not part of the treatment plan. Good thing I am not your patient. The response came so quickly that it caught me off guard. For a second, we simply looked at each other. Then Ethan slid a drawing toward his father. Adrian picked it up carefully. The picture showed 3 birds sitting on the same branch. One larger than the others. One smaller. And one somewhere in between. Adrian stared at the page for several seconds. His expression softened in a way that made him seem years younger. It is beautiful, he said quietly. Ethan lowered his eyes, but he did not pull the drawing away. That mattered. Everything about that moment mattered. Later that afternoon, after Ethan grew tired and fell asleep, Adrian walked me toward the elevator. The hospital corridor felt unusually quiet. You have changed him, he said. No, I replied. He is changing because he finally feels safe enough to try. Adrian was silent for a moment. And what about you, Claire? I blinked. What about me? When was the last time someone made you feel safe enough to try? The question hit harder than it should have. I looked away before he could read the answer on my face. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. Just before they closed, Adrian spoke again. "Would you have dinner with us tomorrow night?" My heart skipped unexpectedly. Then he smiled slightly and added, "Ethan asked me to invite you." The door slid shut before I could see whether that was actually true. The cold January wind followed me all the way home. I kept replaying Adrian's question in my mind as I climbed the stairs to my apartment. Would you have dinner with us tomorrow night? It should not have mattered. It was a simple invitation. Professional. Harmless. Yet I found myself standing in front of my closet the following evening for nearly 20 minutes, wondering why none of my sweaters suddenly looked right. By 6:30, I was sitting in the back of a town car that Adrian had insisted on sending. The city lights blurred beyond the window as we crossed Manhattan. I had expected a luxury penthouse or some enormous estate hidden behind iron gates. Instead, the driver stopped outside a beautiful brownstone tucked away on a quiet street overlooking the river. Warm light glowed through the windows. It looked like a home. Not a monument to wealth. A home. Before I could ring the bell, the front door opened. Ethan stood there. For 1 second he simply stared at me. Then he stepped aside. It was the first time he had ever initiated contact. My smile widened instantly. "Thank you for the invitation," I told him. His cheeks turned slightly pink as he looked down at the floor. Inside, the house smelled like garlic, fresh bread, and something baking in the oven. It felt lived in. Family photographs lined the hallway. Ethan appeared in many of them. Adrian rarely did. That detail stayed with me. Adrian emerged from the kitchen wearing a dark sweater instead of a suit. Somehow that shocked me more than anything else. He looked less like a powerful businessman and more like a father trying very hard to hold his world together. "You found the place," he said. "Your driver deserves the credit. I will make sure he knows." The corners of his mouth lifted. Dinner was surprisingly normal. Ethan ate more than I had ever seen him eat at the hospital. Adrian asked questions about my clinic. I asked about Ethan's favorite books. For nearly 2 hours, nobody mentioned therapy. Nobody discussed progress reports. We simply shared a meal. It was the most relaxed I had felt in years. After dessert, Ethan disappeared upstairs. Adrian and I carried dishes into the kitchen. The sound of running water filled the silence between us. "Thank you," Adrian said quietly. "For tonight?" "For reminding him that life can still feel normal." I dried a plate slowly. Children need that more than they need treatment plans. Adrian studied me for a long moment. "You always make everything sound simple." I laughed softly. "Trust me. Nothing about my life is simple." Something flickered in his eyes. Interest. Curiosity. Maybe recognition. Before he could respond, a woman's voice suddenly echoed from the front hallway. "Adrian, we need to talk." The warmth instantly vanished from the room. Adrian's shoulders stiffened. I looked toward the doorway just as a tall blonde woman stepped inside without waiting for permission. Elegant coat. Diamond earrings. Perfect posture. She stopped when she saw me standing beside him. The smile on her face disappeared. And in that moment, I had the unmistakable feeling that my peaceful little world was about to become very complicated. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The woman looked elegant enough to belong on the cover of a magazine. Every detail about her appeared carefully planned, from the cream-colored coat draped over her shoulders to the diamond bracelet catching the kitchen light. She was beautiful. Confident. And very clearly not happy to see me. Adrian's expression became unreadable. "Victoria," he said evenly. "This is not a good time." Victoria. The name settled heavily in the air. She ignored his comment and turned her attention toward me. Her smile was polite. Perfect. Completely empty. "And who might this be?" I suddenly felt very aware of my inexpensive sweater and the dish towel still hanging from my hand. "Claire Bennett," I said. "I work with Ethan." Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "The therapist." The way she said the word made it sound like something much smaller. Adrian set a plate into the sink with more force than necessary. "Claire was just leaving." I glanced toward him in surprise. Something about the situation had changed. Fast. Victoria stepped farther into the kitchen. "Actually, I am glad we finally met." Her tone remained pleasant. "I have heard quite a bit about you." I doubted that was a good thing. Before I could answer, small footsteps appeared at the top of the staircase. Ethan stood there watching. The moment he saw Victoria, his shoulders visibly tightened. He did not come downstairs. He did not smile. He simply froze. The reaction was immediate and impossible to miss. Adrian noticed it too. "Ethan," he said gently. "It is okay." Ethan remained where he was. Victoria's expression flickered for a fraction of a second before she replaced it with another perfect smile. "He is still shy around me." The explanation felt rehearsed. Adrian said nothing. Neither did I. A strange tension filled the house. One that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with history I did not understand. I gathered my purse from the chair. "I should go." Adrian immediately stepped forward. "I will walk you out." Victoria's smile tightened. Outside, the cold air felt like a relief. Snow crunched beneath our shoes as we walked toward the waiting car. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, I looked at him. "Who is she?" Adrian stared across the street toward the river. "Someone my family believes belongs in my future." The answer was careful. Too careful. "And what do you believe?" His jaw tightened slightly. For the first time since I had met him, he seemed uncertain. "I believe Ethan's happiness matters more than anyone else's plans." Before I could respond, the front door opened behind us. Victoria stood in the doorway watching. Even from 50 feet away, I could feel her eyes on me. Adrian opened the car door. "Good night, Claire." I nodded and climbed inside. As the driver pulled away, I looked back through the window. Adrian remained standing on the sidewalk. Victoria remained in the doorway. And for reasons I could not explain, I had the unsettling feeling that tonight was the moment someone had officially decided I did not belong in Adrian Moretti's world. 3 days later, I understood exactly how powerful people could make someone feel invisible. It started with small things. A parent canceled an appointment without explanation. Then another. Then another. By Friday afternoon, nearly a quarter of my schedule had disappeared. My clinic manager stood beside my desk holding a stack of cancellation notices and looking just as confused as I felt. "This has never happened before," she said. Neither of us knew what to make of it. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. New York was unpredictable. People changed plans. Life happened. But deep down, an uncomfortable feeling had already begun settling into my stomach. That evening, I arrived at Mount Sinai for Ethan's session and immediately noticed something different. 2 nurses standing near the reception desk stopped talking when I walked past. One of them glanced at me, then quickly looked away. The reaction was subtle. Still, I noticed. I had spent years learning how to read people. Inside the therapy room, Ethan seemed distracted. He kept looking toward the door. Every few minutes he reached for his green pencil only to put it back down again. Finally, he slid a drawing across the table. It showed a small bird standing alone while several larger birds watched from nearby branches. My chest tightened. "Sometimes people can be unkind," I said softly. Ethan looked at the drawing but did not change it. The session ended early. As I packed my bag, Adrian appeared in the doorway. The moment he saw me, his expression darkened. "We need to talk." The words immediately made my pulse quicken. Adrian led me toward a private family lounge overlooking the city. Snow drifted beyond the windows while evening traffic crawled below. He handed me a tablet without saying anything. I looked down. My stomach dropped. A photograph filled the screen. Me. Walking beside Adrian outside the hospital. Another image showed us leaving a coffee shop together. A third showed me arriving at his brownstone. The headline above them made my face go cold. Mystery woman close to Adrian Moretti. Social media comments scrolled endlessly beneath the article. Most came from strangers. Some accused me of chasing money. Others insisted I was manipulating Ethan to gain access to his father. A few were worse. I set the tablet down. My hand suddenly felt unsteady. This is ridiculous. Adrian remained silent. Nobody knows anything about me. That has never stopped people before. His voice sounded tired. Older somehow. I looked up at him. Victoria? For the first time, something flashed behind his calm expression. Not anger. Disappointment. I do not know. The answer was honest. That almost made it worse. Outside the window, snow continued falling over Manhattan. Inside, an uncomfortable truth settled between us. I had spent my entire life avoiding attention. Now complete strangers were discussing me as if they knew everything. Adrian stepped closer. I am sorry, Claire. I opened my mouth to answer, but my phone suddenly buzzed. One message. Unknown number. I glanced down and felt all the warmth leave my body. The message contained only a single sentence. Leave Adrian Moretti alone before you regret becoming part of his life. The message stayed on my screen long after the notification disappeared. My reflection stared back at me from the dark hospital window, pale and uncertain. Leave Adrian Moretti alone before you regret becoming part of his life. I read the sentence 3 times. Then 4. It felt childish. Cruel. Petty. Yet it still managed to make my chest tighten. Adrian noticed the change in my expression immediately. What is it? I hesitated before handing him the phone. His eyes moved across the screen. The calmness vanished from his face. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to notice. Claire. Do not tell me it is nothing. He exhaled slowly. People say foolish things when they think they are protecting their interests. That sounds like a yes. He looked away toward the snow falling outside. It sounds like someone wants you frightened. I laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. That part is working. For a moment neither of us spoke. The city lights shimmered below like scattered stars. Finally I slipped the phone back into my purse. Maybe they are right. Adrian's head turned sharply. What? Maybe I do not belong in this world. The words hurt more than I expected. Because part of me believed them. I thought about the headlines. The whispers. The stares from strangers who had already decided who I was. Adrian stepped closer. You belong wherever you choose to belong. The certainty in his voice caught me off guard. Before I could answer, a soft knock interrupted us. Ethan stood in the doorway holding a folded piece of paper. His eyes moved between us. Then he walked directly to me and placed the paper in my hands. I unfolded it carefully. It was another drawing. 3 birds again. The same family from before. But this time there was a storm around them. Dark clouds. Wind. Snow. Yet all 3 birds remained on the same branch. Together. My throat tightened instantly. Ethan watched my reaction with quiet intensity. It is beautiful, I whispered. A faint smile touched his face. Then something happened that neither Adrian nor I expected. Ethan spoke. His voice was rough from years of silence. Barely louder than a whisper. But it was unmistakably a word. Stay. The room froze. My heart stopped. Adrian stared at his son as though the world had suddenly tilted beneath his feet. Ethan looked embarrassed the moment the word left his mouth. His cheeks reddened. He glanced toward the floor. But it was too late. We had all heard it. Adrian's eyes filled with emotion he could no longer hide. Ethan had spoken. One word. One simple word. Yet it carried the weight of 3 silent years. I felt tears sting my eyes. Ethan looked up at me again. Stay, he repeated, a little stronger this time. And in that moment, I realized the hardest decision of my life was no longer whether I cared about Adrian Moretti. The hardest decision was whether I was strong enough to stay when the rest of the world clearly wanted me gone. The sound of Ethan's voice stayed with me long after I left the hospital that night. I heard it during the cab ride home. I heard it while brushing my teeth. I heard it lying awake at 2 in the morning staring at the ceiling of my apartment. Stay. One simple word. Yet somehow it carried more meaning than entire conversations. The next few weeks passed in a blur of small miracles. Ethan spoke more often. Not full conversations. Not yet. But single words became short sentences. Short sentences became hesitant questions. Every new step felt precious. Every new victory felt earned. Adrian never missed a single one. Sometimes I would look up from a therapy exercise and find him watching from the doorway. Not interfering. Not speaking. Just witnessing moments he had almost given up believing would ever happen. One snowy afternoon, Ethan surprised both of us by asking if we wanted to build a model airplane together. The request was simple. Ordinary. Exactly the kind of thing most parents would take for granted. Adrian looked like someone had handed him the world. For the first time in years, laughter filled the brownstone more often than silence. But happiness has a strange way of attracting attention. The more time I spent with Ethan, the more public speculation seemed to grow. Articles continued appearing online. Photographs surfaced whenever Adrian and I were seen together. Most people only recognized the headlines. They never saw the reality. They never saw a father helping his son paint model wings at the kitchen table. They never saw Ethan proudly reading an entire page aloud after years of silence. One evening I arrived at the brownstone to find 3 black luxury cars parked outside. The atmosphere felt different immediately. Tense. Formal. Through the front windows I could see unfamiliar faces gathered inside. Men and women dressed in expensive clothing. Watching. Judging. I almost turned around and left. Before I could, the front door opened. Adrian stepped outside. His expression told me everything. My family is here. I glanced toward the house. That sounds ominous. A faint smile appeared and disappeared just as quickly. It probably is. We entered together. Conversation stopped the moment I crossed the threshold. Every eye in the room settled on me. Some curious. Some skeptical. Some openly disapproving. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Then an older woman seated near the fireplace spoke first. Her silver hair was perfectly styled. Her posture radiated authority. So this is Claire Bennett. I recognized her instantly despite never meeting her before. Adrian's mother. The resemblance around the eyes was unmistakable. I offered a polite smile. It is nice to meet you. She studied me for several seconds. Long enough to make the room uncomfortable. Then she looked at Adrian. We need to talk about your future. The way she emphasized the final word sent a chill through me. Because I suddenly understood something important. The people in this room were not worried about headlines. They were not worried about gossip. They were worried about me. And judging by the expressions around that fireplace, they had already decided I was the wrong choice. The fire crackled softly in the stone fireplace while silence stretched across the room like a wire pulled too tight. I stood near the doorway feeling every pair of eyes on me. Nobody bothered hiding their curiosity. or their judgment. Adrian remained beside me, one hand resting casually in his pocket, but I could sense the tension beneath his calm expression. His mother folded her hands neatly in her lap. "Claire," she said, offering a smile that never reached her eyes, "tell us about yourself." It sounded harmless enough. Yet something about the room made the question feel less like conversation and more like an interview. I told them about my clinic. About working with children. About growing up with a teacher for a mother and a firefighter for a father. Every answer seemed to generate another question. Another evaluation. Another silent assessment. Across the room, Victoria sat beside an older man I assumed was her father. She looked perfectly comfortable. Like someone who already belonged here. Like someone who had never once questioned her place in the world. Every now and then, I caught her watching me. Waiting. Measuring. Hoping I would make a mistake. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. Then Adrian's mother finally said what everyone had been thinking. "You seem like a lovely young woman." My stomach tightened immediately. Nobody ever started a sentence like that unless something unpleasant followed. But Adrian's life is complicated. There it was. The room grew quieter. "I am aware of that," I replied carefully. "Are you?" she asked gently. Because caring for Ethan and building a future beside Adrian are very different things. The words landed harder than they should have. Not because they were cruel. Because they were honest enough to hurt. Before I could respond, Adrian spoke. "That is enough." His voice was calm. Firm. The room instantly fell silent. His mother looked at him steadily. "I am only trying to protect this family. Claire is not a threat to this family." The certainty in his response surprised everyone. Including me. Victoria shifted slightly in her seat. "Nobody said she was a threat." Adrian's eyes moved toward her. "No. You simply keep implying it." The tension became impossible to ignore. Ethan appeared at the top of the staircase before anyone could continue. He hesitated when he noticed the room full of adults. Then his gaze found mine. Without saying a word, he walked downstairs and crossed the entire room. Every person present watched as he stopped beside me. Then he reached for my hand. My heart nearly broke. Ethan hated attention. He avoided crowded rooms whenever possible. Yet here he was. Standing beside me. Choosing me. The reaction around the room was immediate. Surprise. Disbelief. Even Adrian's mother looked genuinely startled. Ethan glanced up at her and quietly said, "Claire stays." The room froze. 3 simple words. But coming from Ethan, they carried more weight than any speech ever could. Nobody answered. Nobody argued. Because for the first time all evening, the person whose opinion mattered most had made himself perfectly clear. And as I stood there holding Ethan's hand, I noticed something else. Victoria was no longer looking at me with confidence. She was looking at me with concern. The weeks that followed should have felt like a victory. Instead, they felt like the calm before a storm. Ethan continued making progress. Every day brought another sentence. Another laugh. Another piece of the bright little boy who had been hidden behind silence for so long. Yet outside the walls of the brownstone, the pressure continued building. Articles multiplied. Rumors spread. Strangers debated my intentions as if they had known me my entire life. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I returned to my clinic after lunch and found an envelope waiting on my desk. No return address. No stamp. Just my name written neatly across the front. A chill ran through me before I even opened it. Inside was a stack of printed photographs. My breath caught. Every picture showed Adrian and me together. Walking beside the river. Leaving the hospital. Sitting at a cafe. None of them were inappropriate. None of them proved anything. Yet someone had clearly spent months watching us. At the bottom of the stack sat a single note. He will always choose his world over you. I stared at the sentence until the words blurred. For the first time, doubt slipped through the cracks in my confidence. That evening I brought the envelope to Adrian. He studied the photographs in silence. The longer he looked, the colder his expression became. "This has gone too far," he said quietly. "Do you know who is doing it?" He did not answer immediately. That worried me more than any response could have. Finally he exhaled. "I know who benefits from it." My stomach tightened. "Victoria." Adrian looked out toward the city lights beyond the window. "Not only Victoria." Before I could ask what that meant, his phone rang. He answered, listened for less than 30 seconds, then ended the call. Something had changed. I could see it in his eyes. "What happened?" He hesitated. "Someone leaked private financial documents this morning." "What does that have to do with us?" His gaze met mine. "The documents make it appear that your clinic received funding connected to me." My heart stopped. "What?" "The information is false." "Then prove it is false." The silence that followed terrified me. Because Adrian was not looking at me anymore. He was staring at the floor. Thinking. Calculating. For the first time since we met, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. Not uncertainty about the facts. Uncertainty about whom he could trust. The realization hurt more than I expected. "You believe it is possible," I whispered. Adrian immediately looked up. "Claire, you believe it is possible." He took a step toward me. I did not say that. But he had not denied it quickly enough. The room suddenly felt smaller. Colder. The distance between us felt enormous. Months of trust trembled on the edge of something dangerous. Something fragile. Something neither of us knew how to protect. And as I stood there holding the envelope that had been designed to destroy us, I realized whoever was behind all of this had finally succeeded in doing the one thing they had been trying to do from the beginning. They had made us question each other. The first snow of December drifted past my apartment window the morning I decided to leave. Not forever. Just long enough to think. Long enough to remember who I was before headlines, rumors, and endless questions had become part of my life. I packed a small suitcase and drove 3 hours north to a quiet town where my parents used to take me when I was a child. I did not tell Adrian where I was going. Part of me believed he would understand. Another part feared he would not come at all. 3 days passed. Then 4. The silence hurt more than I wanted to admit. On the 5th morning, I stepped outside the little lakeside cottage and found fresh footprints in the snow. My heart immediately began racing. Adrian stood near the frozen shoreline with his hands buried inside the pockets of a dark wool coat. He looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. Like a man who had spent days carrying something too heavy to put down. For several seconds neither of us spoke. The cold wind moved across the lake between us. Finally he held out a folder. "You were right." I stared at him. "About what?" "Someone fabricated everything." His voice was quiet. "Honest. The financial records. The photographs. The stories. We found proof." I looked down at the folder but did not take it. "And it only took you days to believe me." The pain behind the words surprised even me. Adrian closed his eyes briefly. "I never stopped believing you. You questioned me. I questioned everyone." His gaze met mine. Including myself. The sincerity in his expression made it impossible to look away. Snowflakes settled on his shoulders. Neither of us moved. Then he took a slow breath. "Victoria admitted she knew more than she claimed. My family finally saw what was happening. The rumors ended. The articles disappeared. None of it matters anymore." I laughed softly. "It matters to me." "I know." He stepped closer. That is why I am here. The distance between us felt smaller now. Manageable. Human. Adrian looked out across the frozen lake before speaking again. For years I thought strength meant protecting people from every storm. His voice grew quieter. Then you and Ethan taught me something different. I felt tears sting my eyes. What? A faint smile appeared. The same smile I had first seen in a hospital hallway. Sometimes strength means trusting people enough to stand beside you in the storm. Neither of us spoke after that. We did not need to. Some truths were bigger than words. A familiar voice suddenly shouted from behind us. Dad. We both turned. Ethan was running across the snow with one of his drawings clutched in his hands. He reached us breathless and smiling. Without hesitation he handed me the paper. 3 birds sat together on the same branch. No storm. No clouds. Just sunlight. Home. Adrian laughed. I laughed. And for the first time in a very long time, everything felt simple. 18 months later, as rain fell outside a cathedral filled with people who thought they understood our story, Adrian looked across the street and found me standing there. The world had tried to separate us with lies, fear, judgment, and doubt. In the end, all it accomplished was teaching us how much we were willing to fight for each other. Some people believe love survives because life becomes easy. Ours survived because every time the world gave us a reason to walk away, we found a reason to stay.